But before we get to those shows starting, let's get to the shows that I've been watching in the meantime. Starting with Welcome to Wrexham, because obviously it's a football show. We're going to be talking Euro 2024. I want to touch on the Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney documentary, which has come back on Disney Plus. It's around halfway through the season, covering last season, which I won't spoil how it got on, but it was a good season for Wrexham. They're back in the Football League now, and obviously they're finding that step up a bit of a struggle. And I kind of see what they're going for here because it is season 3 of this now. And Deadpool and Wolverine, obviously, like we said, is coming out. Rob McElhenney has kind of leaped into a new level of stardom now, partially thanks to this show. So there's not a lot of them here, much less than we've been used to, which does make sense on paper because obviously they want to hand off and kind of make new names and be able to kind of focus on the projects that they're working on as well. But for me, I think this means the show at times kind of loses itself, and the guys are reduced to kind of being talking heads for certain parts in this show. And I liked personally when it was the fish out of water story, and I spent this about season 2 last year as well. I liked the fish out of water element of teaching these American millionaires who they portray as dumbass kind of clowns, teaching them about football and seeing football through their eyes, and them trying to get to grips with the wildness and anachronisms of British football, and as well, just even the fact that they do skits and just be funny and have personality, and they show kind of what this show can be, and when it is working with the kind of show that they did with the opening to the show, that they did a birthday song for Rob about how to pronounce his name, called It's McElhenney, written by the composers of The Greatest Showman, when they're spending stupid amounts of money on stupid shit that they probably shouldn't be spending it on. That's when I feel this show's at the best. But like there's like again, I find myself watching this show at times going, what is this show actually supposed to be about? Because it doesn't seem to have figured that out when they can't get Reynolds and McElhenney being like, so what's football all about? Like one episode, for example, starts with them focusing on the women's team and then takes a hard left into looking at kind of a men's mental health group that's not actually connected to the team. It just happens in Wrexham. And the point the episode finishes on is that Wrexham are playing their arch rivals, Notts County, again. So for me, the latest series is a bit all over the place. It doesn't really have an identity. And I find myself, I haven't watched the last episode yet. And I'm reviewing it here. I probably should have watched that, but I'm not that motivated to watch it as a result, which is a shame. There is some good reality TV on though as well. If you haven't caught up with it yet, the Jinx released season 2 of their documentary show. If you've never watched the Jinx before, it's basically a murder mystery, very much in the zeitgeist. Released season 1 was released around the same time we had Serial and Making a Murderer, and it was one of those big shows that kind of had it. And it had season 1 had the most perfect ending to a season where you basically got a confession on tape in the most delightful way that was set up so perfectly by the creators, Andrew Jarecki. Season 2 is kind of like season 2 of these, where it can be a struggle at times. And the concept is a little bit nasal-gazing in theory, with the first episode showing people watching the premiere of the first season and then news footage of the season. But Drecky's a really talented filmmaker and makes it compelling all the same. The story essentially becomes, how do you turn anything uncovered in a documentary made for entertaining into a compelling, watertight legal case? Can you put someone in prison off the basis of stuff that's revealed through that? Which is kind of stretching the form a little bit and is a risk to keep people hooked on that journey. It's something that, for example, Making a Murderer did try to do with season 2 and really lost its way. But this, I'm really happy to say, in the 6 episodes of season 2, this worked. And it worked by having compelling characters. For example, they've got the 2 young solicitors that they call the Wonder Twins, and they're an absolute shot in the arm as really excited law students who get to work on this case and narrate the story at times with kind of a childlike excitement that all of us sickos who are obsessed with this kind of murder mystery stuff have. Like, again, you sense they just love the Jinx, and I'm not sure that this is the story, but you sense they kind of got into law because of the Jinx, and they're so excited that they got the call to work on the case. And I appreciate that even with the really strong, compelling evidence they got at the end of season 1, they still aren't afraid to give the other side, like, and kind of portray it as a case. And they have you at sometimes going, I've seen this person confess. Like, why am I now doubting if they did it or not? They get you kind of doubting yourself. So just showing really inconsistent prosecution witnesses or airing a tape that shows one murder victim in a really negative light. They're not kind of charging at this from one side. They've got a episode 4. You kind of got to give it a few episodes before it really kicks into gear. But then the last couple episodes really kind of take on another level. And the show manages to kind of pick back up from a first series that ended with that confession to the murders that kind of the central character, who is a fascinating kind of ideal person for this, just because of how crazy and psychopathic some of his decisions are, but just how cheeky he is and how he takes unnecessary risks all the time. Again, makes for a really stupid kind of defendant, but makes for a really, really entertaining kind of focus in a documentary. It also helps the prosecution attorney John Lewin seems really overly hungry at times for the kill shot and kind of willing to do whatever it takes. So you kind of wonder if they're going to mess this up at times. The challenge for the final episode of it, and I won't give away anything in this, after kind of the verdict of the case is revealed in the second to last episode, is to keep it interesting with a really strange cliffhanger based around kind of Bob Durst's wife and how she sent her lawyer in to kind of observed the case and kind of was feeding back information to Bob. But what really works is about the Jinx is it's on one hand a polished, expensive, professionally made HBO documentary, but also pulls the curtain back on the documentary at times. Like sometimes there's a bit of revelation. There's a revelation in news at one stage about one of the people involved in the case, and it happens while they're doing a talking head interview. So you see the talking head interview, and then it kind of cuts out of that while Andrew Jarecki, the filmmaker, who again is kind of an on camera character in the kind of story as well, he receives a phone call that kind of relays this news. So it also kind of feels like a true crime podcast that's being released weekly and investigated in real time, but it has the HBO sheen to it as well. I'm not going to criticize the ending for not living up to season 1, because season 1 is a once in a lifetime. How could this happen? I don't think any of the creators could have even dreamed of getting something like this. So it's an unfair bar to hold it to. But what it does amazingly is somehow, and I don't think they're going to go with this, but they set up an option for a potential new series that's really unlikely, but possible. And if need be, which is a really testament to Andrew Jarecki as a filmmaker, because they could have came into this and be like, we solved the case in season 1, but they somehow made an almost equally compelling season 2. I really enjoyed it, and I was glad to have this back in my life. Couple of shows I was glad to have back in my life in terms of like kind of popcorn comedies was Abbott Elementary season 3 and Young Sheldon season 7. Abbott Elementary, if you haven't checked it out, I can only recommend it enough. It really just picks up the mantle for me from Brooklyn Nine-Nine as the kind of seminal comedy of our time, and kind of just will restore your faith in kind of that sitcom kind of comedy, for both having kind of silly humor, great characters, but also a heart and something you find yourself unknowingly investing in. It does kind of have a bit of social commentary as well. If you've never seen Abbott Elementary, it's a kind of mockumentary story that's based in a Philadelphia largely black high education system, and it focuses on Janine Teague, who is the series creator, played by the series creator, who in this series the plot revolves around her joining the school district, so getting to have a say in kind of bigger education systems, and that's how they do a lot of their social commentary. But it doesn't feel like it's lecturing you at any stage. It doesn't feel like it's trying to hammer messages home. It can do it all very light while feeling like a BAU sitcom. Then the kind of show in season 1 which pushed boundaries a bit to win awards, but on a humor level, this is still probably the funniest show on TV currently. I liked as well the fact that they kind of they do things at their own pace. They didn't like make her Janine's district storyline the full kind of series arc. They also have a will they won't they with her and Gregory throughout this as well. They didn't make that kind of a full series arc as well. Like they kind of just the district storyline, for example, was wrapped up by around episode 10. And as well, they kind of let their characters kind of show all sides of themselves in the way that true great sitcoms do. Like Gregory, for example, who's very straight-laced and very serious throughout all this, and is usually the straight man. He gets to play it crazy at some stages while everyone else plays it straight. Well, he thinks Janine is on a date in one of the highlights for me. The best episode for me, and I won't say anything about it in terms of spoilers or anything, the playground war with Liberty. And then there's a big talking point at the end to kind of jump off it, which got everyone talking, and in the way sitcoms really do. So keep an eye on Abbott Elementary. It's going to be one to watch. And if you haven't added it to your rotation, do yourself a favor. It's such an easy, fun, nice, wholesome watch while also still being intelligent too. On a more traditional sitcom level, I want to give a shout out to young Sheldon because I get it. You're looking at this going, Sheldon, the Big Bang Theory, that spin-off. I didn't like the Big Bang Theory at the end, and you're preaching to the convert. I didn't like it either, okay? But what I like about young Sheldon and what really got me invested in watching this and actually caring about this for 7 seasons was the tone shift. So this isn't filmed in front of a live studio audience. It's a throwback to Sheldon's days growing up, and it's a really old school comedy, a grounded family comedy, meaning that where you really started investing in the characters and their relationships with each other. And the finale, which was a bit somber, paid off for me in a big way. There were sad character beats throughout here, which hit hard emotionally, but the show has enough goodwill to kind of bring you back in with some gentle humor. And this show in general is gentle. If you're looking for something simple and gentle to binge, if it's something you want to maybe watch with your family or something like that as well, I recommend this. I think this was a great TV show that really, really worked. Like the best family comedies, you come to know these characters and their isms as if they are your family as well. And there's not one dislikable character in this. Everyone feels fleshed out in it, even when they're in the wrong. And the show takes time to see their side as well. The show came along at a really tough time when the world had, by and large, as we said, had its fill of Big Bang Theory, but the cast bought in fully here and got the brief in full. And one criticism, for example, of The Big Bang was that it was exploitative and mean-spirited and poking fun at nerd culture. This show could not be further from that. It's kind, it's gentle, and that's why when it works, it really fucking works. It works to the point that, and this, again, I don't think this is a big spoiler, but Jim Parsons narrates the entire show, and in a cute Easter egg that does work. And of course, as you can imagine, at the end of the series, you do see Jim Parsons, and he does show up as older Sheldon after the Big Bang Theory. And when that happens, it doesn't really work for me because that's an inferior show that I'm now looking at. And I want to spend the remaining time I have with these characters with them and learn about that, not see how old Sheldon is. I'm here for young Sheldon. I'm here for this show. It ended really, really strongly. It at one stage had me crying, and that isn't the first time this show has done for that for me as well. And I just didn't expect it. I just gave it a chance after the Big Bang Theory. I was really low on that show in general, and it won me back over kindly, gently, and a triumph for all involved. Last but not least, speaking of spin-offs, let's talk about the first Walking Dead spin-off, surprisingly, that's been released over here. The Ones Who Live, which basically, all episodes of Sky were released last week. The story is about the return of Rick Grimes after what many consider a bit of a cop-out survival in The Walking Dead to kind of parachute him into his own new show. And basically, it's about reuniting him and his wife from The Walking Dead, Michonne. It's really refreshing for me to see Andrew Lincoln back playing what's probably the role that will define his career, apart from those few minute scenes that infuriate me in Love Actually. And he brings all the really easy to impersonate mannerisms with him. They create reasons for him to say Carl, and he says Carl really well. So yeah, you get all of that. Then you've got some excellent casting apart from that. John fucking Locke, Terry O'Quinn is here and is a really welcome familiar face, but it does at times suffer from the issue with spin-offs, so trying to make us give a shit about characters we just met while trying to keep what we loved about the original. And we're like, just give us the characters we want. But with people like Terry O'Quinn in here that we know, we love, and we haven't seen in a while, again, I was able to kind of overcome that a bit better. The show looks lush in a way that later series, the original show, didn't, after AMC kind of lost confidence in it, and it went and kind of, you know, ran it towards the finish line. There's clearly a lot riding on this success with its two top stars, and they are putting money into it as a result. And what I like about this is that, again, when you're used to these kind of shows, and The Walking Dead was guilty of this itself, by the way, a lot of the time, kind of you see characters move on from a very meaningful death like the next day. They bury the dead and they're never spoken about again. Whereas this is a show which speaks of long-term grief and kind of working towards or working back towards someone. And I really appreciated that as well. And another thing I liked about it is they didn't beat around the bush with the plot here. They don't rush into what happened after we let our characters, but we know that at some point, if this show is about them two finding each other, they will find each other eventually. And they didn't draw that out unnecessarily. They let us spend enough time with them to kind of get here's what happened in between when you last saw them and now. But then they kind of got into it and they allowed them to kind of spend a lot of time together. Dana Gurira, who plays Michonne, outgrew the Walking Dead universe a long time. And as Michonne now, it's clear that she's carrying this from an acting standpoint, giving the lines that can come across melodramatic and did, particularly in later seasons of The Walking Dead, where it felt very morose and depressing and down at times. But she gives this weight and meaning and credibility with every line and every facial expression. Again, it could be a really empty melodrama, but she really sells it and brings out the best in Andrew Lincoln to do so too. So that for me is why this works. Not everything works. Like, for example, the score is like a Wish version of the Last of Us score. I think they owe Gustavo Santaolalla money for this. And again, there was a focus on Jadis, who for me was in a show where they're trying to make us feel real emotions and really care about characters. She was a comic book like villain who took me out of the world every time she showed up. And she did the same in The Walking Dead. I didn't like her. And her stupid bowl haircut, which they call a stupid haircut, so I'm allowed to say it here, makes it all worse. I didn't like her in it, and I wasn't happy to see her show back up. I don't think there was zero appetite. But look, for the most part, it's Rick and Michonne being Rick and Michonne, doing it well. It's a nice return to reality without feeling kind of exploitative or add-on. We're kind of used to this kind of content now as well, which helps. So the ones who live, if you're into The Walking Dead, if you're an addict, if you're looking for a fix of Rick and Michonne, I'd recommend it. It works.